Many people in Australia have only recently heard about Jordan Peterson. He made a big splash here because of his interview with Cathy Newman on Channel 4 in Britain. And people keep talking about that. And then there's the really exciting news that he's coming to Australia in March. And I'm really thrilled to be the MC for his first talk here in Melbourne on March the 8th. I've spent over 40 years speaking out about what's happening to men, and particularly young men, and why they're in such trouble. And one of the strongest themes in Jordan's work is about helping young men. He's one of the very few people internationally who's taking this problem really seriously, and he absolutely cares about this younger generation of males.
Yeah, well, it's this, see, now it did it to me again. Look, last night, I was at this talk I gave, and about 1,000 people came, and about 500 of them stayed afterwards, and most of them were young men, and just one of them after the other comes up to me, and they shake my hand, and they say, look, I've been listening to what you've been saying for 6 months, and it's changed my life. It's like I was depressed, I was addicted to drugs, my relationships weren't working out, I was hopeless, I didn't have any goal. I started cleaning up my room and telling the truth and working hard on myself, and it's really working, and I just want to thank you for helping me. And I think, God, it's so sad that so many of these men, they've not had an encouraging bloody word, a real encouraging word in their entire life. It just takes a little bit of encouragement and care so that they're willing to set themselves straight to some degree and start trying. It's just a catastrophe that's so rare in their lives. And so, yeah, well, every time, you see, because I see the same thing when I'm talking. My audiences are often composed mostly of men between, say, 20 and 35. Not exactly young, but young enough. And they're desperate for a discussion about responsibility and fair play and noble being and working properly in the world. And the idea, and to hear the idea that their lives actually matter, that if they straighten themselves up and fly right, that they'll have a beneficial effect on themselves and their family and the community, and that the world is starving for that. And for them as individuals, not for them as a group, but for each of them as individuals. So, yeah, it breaks me up. Every time the topic comes up, it breaks me up because it's so damn sad. And we're so stupid. We're alienating young men. We're telling them that they're patriarchal oppressors and denizens of rape culture and tyrants in waiting, and we fail to discriminate between their competence and their tyranny. And it's awful. It's so destructive. It's so unnecessary. And it's so sad. And so whenever I think about it, especially because of all that I've seen of it, it makes me sad, like deeply. It's so sad.
Why has it happened?
Oh, God, that's a complicated question. I mean, well, it's partly happened because every culture has a tyrannical element, I mean, our culture isn't perfect. There is oppressive elements to it. It's not completely fair. So some of it is just the age-old observation that you don't get a culture without a bit of a tyranny. A lot of it is resentment and failure to take responsibility. It's people saying, instead of looking at the part they play in making the world a dark and terrible place, they blame something like the patriarchy and then assume that all the men who compose it are somehow malevolent tyrants or tyrants in waiting. It's like it's ideological possession. There's just no excuse for it. It's motivated by resentment.
Does
mostly.
Feminism have a role to play in that?
Well, it depends on how you define feminism. If it's the feminism that says, wouldn't it be lovely if women could offer what they have to the world so that the world would be a better place on the same footings as men? Well, no, that's great. If it's the feminism that says that Western culture is an evil, corrupt patriarchy, then absolutely. There's no excuse for that sort of thing.
It's that passion that really excites me. A British journalist recently described Jordan as one of the most important thinkers to emerge on the world stage for many years. And this important thinker is devoting a lot of his efforts to working out how to help young men. How wonderful is that? So what is he telling these young men? Here he is on a recent interview with the BBC.
Why do you think that your words are resonating so much with men, which is a section of society, let's face it, where we know in many countries there are problems, huge rates of suicide in this country?
Oh yes, and dropout as well, especially in institutions like the universities, where men are bailing out like mad. Well, I think partly with men can delay maturation. They need a reason to mature, and the proper reason isn't compulsion, it's ambition. And I mean ambition in the best sense. I talk a lot to young men about responsibility and truth, and try to outline the notion that the meaning that's to be found in life, the meaning that sustains you through good times and bad, is much more associated with responsibility than it is with, say, rights or freedoms or impulsive pleasures. It's like I'm selling the most unsaleable possible package of messages, right? It's like there's something true about Christianity. It's like, yeah, sure, we're gonna, right. I'm going to sell that to young men. No, that's not going to happen. I'm going to tell them that they should adopt more responsibility and stop being so damn impulsive and tell the truth, and they're all going to be like really happy about that. Well, that's what's happening. So I don't know why it is, but it's partly because I can actually tell a story about responsibility. You know, people have been told for 50 years that the meaning in your life comes from freedom and rights. It's like, no, that's not right. I mean, sometimes it's right because you're so goddamn oppressed that, you know, the system has to be fractured to give you a little bit of freedom. But at the moment, that's not the case. The case is that you're going to find most of your meaning by picking up your damn load and stumbling forward. And it's like, that's how you respect yourself. And that's a huge part of what the book is about. It's like, there's a lot wrong with you. You're fragile, you crumble, you age, you die, you're weak, you're ignorant, and you're touched by malevolence, and a lot of it is willful. It's like, what the hell, man? How can you look at yourself in the mirror? You're such a miserable mess. And the answer to that is pick up something heavy, right? Something that's a benefit to you and the rest of the world, and stumble forward mightily with it. And then maybe you can tolerate your miserable existence without becoming a blight on reality. Okay, so, and people find that funny as well. It's like, it's, you know, it's funny. It's like...
But it's not just broad messages about responsibility. Jordan has very specific advice for young men about how to do this, how to break out of this cycle of depression and despair and find meaning in life.
So, for example, if someone comes into me and see me and they say they're depressed, I always ask them a very standard set of questions. Do you have a job? If you don't have a job, you're really in trouble in our society. First of all, your biological rhythms tend to go off the rails right away because there's no reason to go to bed at any particular time and there's no reason to get up. And for many people, if they don't get up at the same time, they foul up the functioning of their circadian rhythms, and that's enough to make them depressed right off the bat, especially if they start napping during the afternoon. They also don't have a purpose. People aren't good without a purpose. And this isn't hypothesizing. We absolutely understand the circuitry that underlies positive emotion. When you're attending to something you're interested in and you're engaged in it, that's when you're alive. That's when life is worthwhile. It's so worthwhile that in those moments you don't even ask the question about it. The question itself goes away because the meaning that you're united with is so powerful that it can push back the adversity that would otherwise characterize life. Nietzsche said, the person who has a why can bear any how. We know how it works. Almost all the positive emotion that any of you are likely to experience in your life will not be a consequence of attaining things. It will be a consequence of seeing that things are working as you proceed towards a goal you value. That's completely different. And you need to know this because people are often stunned, for example. They finish their PhD thesis and their presupposition is that they're going to be elated for a month. And often instead they're actually depressed. And they think, what the hell, I've been working on this for 7 years and I handed it in and what do I do now? And that's what depresses them, right? It's the what do I do now? Well, they're fine if they enjoyed it, pursuing the thing. As long as it was working out, they get a lot of enthusiasm and excitement out of that because that's how our nervous systems work. Most of your positive emotion is goal pursuit emotion. If you take drugs like cocaine or amphetamine, the reason they're enjoyable is because they turn on the systems that help you pursue goals. That's why people like them. So if you don't have a job, you got no structure, that's not good. Plus, you tend not to have a point. So you're overwhelmed by chaotic lack of structure and you don't have any positive emotion. Assuming you want to get better, there's usually something you can figure out that would constitute a step towards some sort of concrete goal. And my presumption, it's a behavioral presumption fundamentally, is that small accruing gains that repeat are unbelievably powerful. you can tyrannize yourself into doing things, but I wouldn't recommend it. What I would recommend instead is that you ask yourself what you're willing to do. It's a really effective technique. It's like a meditative technique. So for example, you can get up in the morning and you can think, well, you know, I'd like to have a good day today, so I'd like to go to bed tonight without feeling guilty because I, you know, didn't do some things I said I was going to do, and I'd like to have kind of an interesting day. So you got to fulfill my responsibilities, and I want to, you know, enjoy the day. Then you can ask yourself, well, okay, what would I have to do in order for that to happen that I would do? And the probability, if you practice this for 3 or 4 days, is your brain will just tell you. It'll say, well, you know, there's that piece of homework that you haven't done for like 3 weeks. You should knock that sucker off because it would only take you 10 minutes, and you've been avoiding it and torturing yourself to death for, you know, like 72 hours straight. And say, well, let's figure out what your aims are. You got to have some aims, whatever they are. And they might say, well, I'm so depressed I don't have any aims. And then I say, well, pick the least objectionable of the aims and act it out for a while and see what happens. Because sometimes your emotional systems are so fouled up that you have to pretend, you have to act the thing out before you can start to believe it. Life can be meaningful enough to justify its suffering. I thought, God, that's such a good idea. Because it's not optimistic exactly. You know, some people will tell you, well, you can be happy. It's like, those people are idiots. I'm telling you, they're idiots. There's going to be things that come along that flatten you so hard you won't believe it. And you're not happy then. And so if life is to be happy, well, in those situations, what are you doing? Why even live? But life isn't to be happy. If you're happy, you're bloody fortunate, and you should enjoy it. You should, because it's the grace of God, so to speak.
Finally, I want to show you this. Here's Jordan Peterson talking about a chapter from his book, 12 Lessons for Life. And the chapter's called How Not to Bother Children When They're Skateboarding. Jordan really understands young men, I think. He understands why it is that they need to take risks and sometimes walk on the wild side. I just love what he has to say here.
Well, that's an essay about masculinity, mostly. You know, I used to watch kids skateboard on St. George Street, which is kind of cool, you know, because obviously St. George is the dragon slayer. That's the street I work on, which I think is quite funny. And anyways, these kids used to, you know, they're teenagers, young teenagers. We had these long bar hand railings going down some shallow stairs, but a fairly good flight of them, and they would board slide down these rails. It's crazy. It's concrete that's pebbled. It's like you don't want to land on that.
You probably heard a lot of bones crunching over the years. Yeah.
Watching them, it's like, you know, and they didn't have much protective gear on, and you know, and eventually the university put up things to stop them, you know, from doing this, which I complain about in this chapter for a bunch of reasons. But like, I liked watching those kids. I like watching skateboarders do those crazy things because they're trying to become competent. Like, and they're facing danger. They don't want the damn protective gear. Like, sometimes it's just stupidity. It's like, wear a damn helmet, you know? But sometimes it's not. It's like, no, I don't want to wear a helmet. I want to expose myself to this danger. It's not that I'm stupid. Maybe it is. You know, I'm just being careless.
Right.
But maybe it's not. It's like, no, I'm facing the danger. I'm trying to master it. And if you watch kids board slide down like handrails, if you don't think that that's courageous, then you're, and maybe stupid. Those two things aren't so easy to distinguish.
Yeah.
But it's brave. And when they do it, it's like amazing. It's impossible to do that. You jump in the air, you grab your skateboard, you balance on this stupid rail, you slide for 20 feet. And the price for failure is, well, you do the splits on the rail. That's not fun. You know, or you land head first on the
That's not good. That's not good.
Fun.
Yeah.
No, that's bad.
That can change your masculinity like that. You know?
Yeah. And so like, and the kids are often shooed away. It's like, wait a sec, they're practicing being courageous. They're practicing mastering something in the face of danger. You know, and a lot of the rebellious behavior of young men in particular, which is very frowned upon in the schools. It's like, that's toxic masculinity, you know, that horrid phrase. It's like, leave those damn kids alone.
Okay, that's it for right now. I'm actually off overseas for a week or so to see my gorgeous young granddaughter. But when I get back, I've got a whole lot of interviews lined up, including, I hope, one with Jordan Peterson, which I'm very excited about. I'm now working full time on trying to get the message out about what's happening to young men and older men of any age. I've given up my online dating coaching, and I'm going to be making many more YouTube videos and writing and do a bit of TV and so on. It's really nice. I want to thank you all who are supporting me already. If those of you who haven't done so, you'll find information about how to do this on my website or below this actual video. You can do this through PayPal or through Patreon. And please subscribe to my videos, like my videos, and spread the word about what I'm doing. Thanks very much.